Hello, everybody out there. It is that time again to check out the next episode of the docuseries of Callisto Protocol. The first episode we went through was how the horror icons of the industry and the creators of the game decided to discuss the brutality of the horror genre in itself and how they are implementing it into the game. Today, they are going to be talking about how the implementation of the tension and atmosphere is geared towards the horror genre and how they set up the settings to make everything, look and just feel exactly the way that we wanted to give us that scary element to it. So let's check it out, see what they're going to be talking about in this one. We'll probably pause it from time to time, maybe break a few things down. So let's see what they have for us this round.
The Callisto Protocol is mastering horror.
Atmosphere. The pervading tone or mood of a play, situation, or work of art. Tension, mental or emotional strain.
The tension in the game is key.
Well, when you think about horror, it's not just sort of an endless series of jump scares one after another.
Tension is built.
Right. Let's just take a second to throw some stuff out there about like tension. You want things to have a building force before we get right into the jump scares, before we get right into the gore and the action or whatever. As I was saying in the first episode, it is great to build that suspense and that tension first before you get into the meat of the horror, whatever is happening in the story and the setting and whatnot. And again, it really builds for those moments of really not knowing what's going to happen. You're kind of expecting it to, but you don't know when, and keeping you guessing is one of the best things.
In the moments where you know something is coming, but you don't quite know what it will be and where it will come from.
And then that release, whether it's a scare or not, right? You have to be on your edge of your seat because
tip of your toes.
You never know. Are we going to scare you then?
And that's kind of nice too, to kind of give us like when we're going into these like very narrow like corridors, hallways and whatnot, we're really kind of zoomed in on the character. You can't really see a lot of like what's happening.
Players want to have moments of success. Players want to have moments where that tempo is changing. So that adds to the tension. It adds to the suspense. It adds to the unknown.
It's about blowing air into the balloon, making it bigger and bigger. So when there's finally that moment of release, that burst of horror, the jump scare, we get as sort of big a reaction as possible from the player.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. So, all right, we've seen this now. So when we get to this part in the game, it's like, I know something's going to happen. But anyway, something I do want to point out about, again, like the building of the tension is music really does play a really key role in this. There's times where you'll get to a section where the music just maybe even just kind of cuts or goes like super soft. You're not really expecting something and then the jump scare happens. Or I would say a really good example of this was the zero gravity sections. I actually not really so much like the zero gravity sections of Dead Space entirely, but when you actually entered into space and it was just nothing but quiet, you could barely hear yourself reload. You could barely hear you can hear just these very subtle sounds of like your footsteps. You couldn't really hear much around you. You could hear the tick tock of the of your O2 tank depleting as you are going through space. You're in the vacuum and your air supply is cut off, and you have the enemies that are lurking in places you may not know where they're at because you don't hear nothing. You don't hear the sounds, and it's that silence that just really makes you have to check, you know, your surroundings and make sure that you're always watching, you know, left and right.
That kind of tension building is similar to film and TV.
If you can, you know, work on the anticipation of the audience, if you can play their anticipation against them, that's another way to build suspense and to make things, you know, more terrifying.
Most people want to avoid or get out of a feeling that's so intense and dreadful. In fact, our natural response when we feel an intense negative emotion is to find a way out of it, make it stop. Those of us who are willing to tolerate that peak are actually kind of more emotionally intelligent when we know eventually that's going to dip out. And those folks that interact with the game for prolonged periods of time are better able to be in control of emotions during that tension.
And I think a lot of times too, it does take, you know, again with this, you know, with a game with something that has like a lot of replay value, something that you might go and experience again. It's just like a movie too. Once you are experiencing it for the first time, you don't know what's going to happen. You have an idea of it, yes, but you don't know when the scares are going to come. You don't know when the tension building is going to rise or the suspense level is going to be keeping you at the tip of your toes. But if you're willing to stick it out and you're willing to go through it multiple times, and in a sense like these games, you know, where you go back through and you play them, you know, once, twice, 3 times, you'll be able to understand and learn when things are going to happen, to be able to kind of train yourself to handle those moments when they come, so they're not as intense. As she was saying, you want to be able to find your way out of the stressful moments. So sometimes that leads to panic, sometimes that leads to stressing a little bit too much, and it might kind of hinder your gameplay. That's definitely happened to me in the form of, you know, being anxious. You're anxious to move forward and to get it over with. And yeah, first time around it can be tough, but once you go through it a few times, it's not as bad. Okay, we got some time to reload. Not much happening. We get some moments where we can kind of sit and
atmosphere in a game
relax.
like this is everything.
Atmosphere and mood is very, very important to the success of horror, to building suspense and to set the stage for what's coming.
It's so critical to kind of creating that experience, that sort of visceral, sort of emotional reaction.
Alien, the spaceship, you know, you're a gazillion miles from home. And if you believe what's going on, you're with them a gazillion miles at home.
To me, that movie is one of the best examples of atmosphere. You're treated to a lot of cool visuals of the environment, and you know, you get to know this workaday world of these, you know, space truckers and what their spaceship looks like, etc.
What does atmosphere mean? It means lighting. It means the space we're in. Is it wide open? Is it tight and claustrophobic? What are the sounds we're hearing?
This is great.
It almost informs you of what can happen to you, what will happen to you, what is the overall attitude in the place that you're in.
So when we think about sort of our environments, the mood, the atmosphere, it's all about building that tension.
I think that what we're talking about is vulnerable people and a place where there's a great deal of jeopardy, which they may or may not know about.
So what happened to the original colony?
The big word for atmosphere, I think, is immersion.
I want to feel getting spooked while looking over my shoulder. I want all of that. I love it all.
I think that's the beauty of the whole gaming world, is that you are truly immersed and you sort of control your own destiny. And this one is, I mean, the guys that made it, I was like, are you okay? How did you think of that? And what went through you? Like, what was your creative process to think of that? That is unbelievably scary.
The design of the prison and the overall planet and just the environment is a pretty deep process.
We probably put half of our resource just on environment design into getting the right atmosphere.
Yes, because, you know, when we're talking about survival horror, you know, I think there are a lot of times where horror games can really excel when it makes you feel closed in, with this being a prison on a moon out in space, the claustrophobia that builds with you not really feeling like you have far to go. You don't really have like an open land and open, area to be able to, just, I'm going to run over here and hide over here. I mean, sometimes you are just like in a narrow space. You don't have a lot of room to move, and you're just kind of, caged in, and that is a perfect scenario. It is a very, very short window of opportunity to be able to execute choices in such a condensed space. Shoot the tentacles!
It starts with our concept team. We'll throw kind of just a bunch of general ideas at them, like what does Gem Pop look like? What does Solitary look like? What does the surface of Callisto look like?
I think of design as like a pyramid where you lay down a big foundation of lots of different ideas where you try to be as disparate as possible with what you're showing so that the director can go, I don't like that, I don't like that, but I like that, I like that. And then that moves up to the next level, which is a smaller platform, and then you keep going until you arrive at that thing at the top.
In the beginning, it was mostly just the environment artist and the concept artist talking together, and we would go back and forth of, oh, this would look better, or how about this? What about this color scheme?
And those guys, they're so creative. They find these great references, and then they'll kind of take those references and just turn them into something you can't even believe.
You set up a mood where someone else that's like really good at architecture comes in and do some amazing designs, and then we can like take that further, getting different moods, different pieces. It's a lot of back and forth between different concept artists, and I get to learn a lot from them as well.
Certainly, I think we did our fair share of research. So we have influences, Cameron, we have Kubrick, we have Ridley Scott.
Our art director, Demetrius, and I spent a lot of time like finding imagery and stuff that we would kind of throw their way. Like, hey, we're thinking we need some sort of a futurized panopticon area inside the prison, or we need to futurize, like, what does Solitary look like? Like, we want it to be darker. We want it to be more brutal feeling, just something that is just terrifying to walk through.
We want to make you afraid of opening every door. Why are all the cells empty? That sort of thing, right? We want you to think a little bit as well, right?
When we were doing the research, some of the stuff became self-evidence. When we were designing the creatures, mutation was something that we were putting forth. And
I just want to pause real quick. What Glenn Schofield was saying about making you think, that is what is so good about games like this, is where, you go in and it's like, what happened? We don't really have, a lot of background as to what took place, for things to really turn out how they do. And that's what is like really good about games that rely a little more on lore, rely a little bit more on your ability to explore and find secrets, to unlock things of the past and figure out what happened. Like, how did this turn out the way that it did? And games like Dead Space are great at that. Games, just in my experience of playing a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, I always thought the same thing, exactly like what happened before humanity fell and the machines took over, and you have just this dystopian type world that has just been taken over by the machines, and how everything's just overgrown, and you have just the remnants of buildings and the skeletal remains of people's bodies, logs that you'll find with audio connected to them, talking about things that were happening at that current place and time. That is just, it's so interesting to listen to that, and it really makes you have a deep sense of imagination about exactly what's going on, what life was like, before, the monsters took over, before machines took over. And I always enjoy being able to kind of think about a story rather than it always, being kind of just, flushed in your face and whatnot. It's great. Both ways, lore or whether, it's just full on storytelling, they both have their advantages.
When we were designing the environments to match that, we thought, what matches mutation? What's a technology that matches mutation? There's something called generative design that's for taking man-made objects, throwing it through AI, and it mutates it into a new design. But what comes out looks very alien and not man-made at all. So it was a perfect match for what we were doing with the creatures.
And so we'll go through a few revs of kind of like designing what the lighting scheme would be like, what the color scheme would be like.
They didn't have a clue what was going on. Things are changing.
For the better, I hope.
To come up with the color palette, we actually went through the psychology of the color, emotion of the colors, as well as to actually referencing a lot of horror movies, sci-fi horror movies.
Yeah, the emotional color is an interesting thing. I didn't really think about it before. And working with lighting and the team, they sort of introduced we watch these movies and they put colors into scenes that we don't really think about.
One of our areas is a very kind of wet processing area, and so we deliberately use greens and yellows and browns in those because
murky.
They are colors which emphasize disgust.
Yeah.
And so we want the disgust to come through as the underlying fear element in those areas, and we play around with color space theory all the time through our very sophisticated lighting system.
Combining that with us trying to tell the story of what's happening in each one of these spaces, using materials, using bloody handprints, following a trail to someone who's lying there on the floor. Combining that with the color theory, it provides a very impactful experience, I think.
Sim, our environment director, he has guided our environment team in building these great spaces that not only are just beautifully horrific, but also really compelling and really fun play spaces. That
beautifully
you can
horrific
and want to explore and want to understand by looking at your environment what happened here.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, right? High contrast, dark areas, gross spaces that you don't want to be in, right? Makes you uncomfortable, and lots of blood.
Those are all the right ingredients that we need to be able to create the perfect environment.
Each space should make you feel a certain type of way. So going along with, okay, how do we make the player feel isolated? Well, that's going to be a totally different kind of feel. It's going to be made out of different material. It's going to sound different when you walk around it. Or how do we make the player feel trapped? That's going to be another kind of environment. So it's going off of what we kind of know and then making it fit into kind of that world and how we want to make the player kind of feel in that moment.
Confusion is an important part of horror, and providing information, maybe misinformation or taking away information or making information abstract. And we can ramp that up or dial it back.
I mean, if it was brightly lit, you feel safe. You're like in a hospital, everything is white and sanitary. But in the darkened basement, you can't see, even peripherally, what might be coming up at you.
One part of tension is what's around the corner. A lot of times we're designing very claustrophobic places in concept. We kind of are casting shadows that could possibly look like some monster hiding around the corner.
Okay.
Glenn wanted to create
make us think twice about our surroundings
for the monsters to come out.
I think that's why it's really good that this is a third-person thing. You'd have a sense that there is a back and you can't see what's behind you or what's beyond the frame to the right or the left.
I have always wondered what it would really be like to do like a VR experience of this or like Dead Space. I remember a few times thinking about how much more of a horrific impact it could be on your mind doing a first-person horror survival like this, where you are, more in a type of situation where you are trapped in a place that is just very condensed down and has very narrow type pathways for you to be able to take, just the dark areas, as they say, casting the shadows of what you may think is a monster, but you're not. I kind of think that first person would probably be a lot more terrifying. Third person, in a sense, it does have its terrifying moments, but first person, like Alien Isolation, Outlast, as in the first Outlast where you were actually in an asylum, those were definitely much more claustrophobic type of survival horrors that really implemented first person in that sense that can really work to be truly frightening.
It's not just going to be, one door opens and they're right there. It's coming out from different vents and pipes, and sometimes you hear something in the background and you don't notice it, but then you do as the audience member.
I do really like how we are
In the
seemingly
50s and 60s, there was a filmmaker by the name.
how we are seemingly going to get what looks so far like a pretty decent mix of that tension building, and then we'll have our moments of action and horror and gore, and I think it is going to be a decent mix of it so far. So let's continue.
Name of William Castle, and he understood that enhancing shock and fear could be more fun.
I love William Castle. I'm very attracted to those kinds of larger than life personalities, people who are, they may be doing something cheesy and, low art, but they're pushing the envelope there.
He developed this thing called a Percepto buzzer. He would have these buzzers in seats go off while the movie was playing, probably during points of tension. This was essentially shocking moviegoers, but it was also very exciting for them.
The new PlayStation controllers,
the true era of horror,
the combination of being able to feel your heartbeat and the footsteps and everything around you,
and so that puts it right in your lap, in your hands. And so we've been able to amplify everything the same way with the buzzers under the seats. We can buzz you, and on the flip side, on some of the kind of body gore stuff, we can feel a bone breaking when you lop it off and stuff. And it's that type of stuff that makes you kind of winch a little bit. It's really satisfying.
But then being able to have the speaker built into that controller as well, it kind of gives you a whole new tool in your toolbox. Like you could be walking down a hallway and hear whispering and be like, where the hell is that coming from, right? And it just kind of trickles out of that speaker. Be able to kind of use that to build atmosphere and tension. It's like a kid in a candy store with stuff like that for a game like this.
Well, let's say that goes both ways, because, say if you are using headphones, like me, most likely I'll be using headphones for a game like this. I feel that I've had some moments in horror games like this where I have had to take the headphones off because it just really sinks into your soul, that just feeling of anxiety when you're just hearing those sounds and just the deep bassy moments of when the jump scares come and whatnot. Outlast 2 did that shit to me, and yeah, there were a few times I had to take the headphones off. So I mean, when we're talking about how they're going to utilize certain types of, obviously, technology like this to be able to build moments of fear and tension and whatnot, if you're using headphones, you're not really going to be able to hear it that well through your controller. But vice versa, if you don't want to use the headphones because it may be a little bit too intense for you, then you can really utilize the advantages of the speaker in the controller to give you that extra bump of terror and menace. Okay, that was actually an accurate sound. That sound came from the right side, and I heard it from here.
Of sound in order to create fear.
There you go.
Is, I think, brilliant.
Not just the sounds of the creatures, which are terrifying on their own right, but the sounds of the environment and the music and the part that plays.
Oh wow, they're doing all of that right now. Right on.
Cameron told me that he felt that 40% of the visual impact of any given shot or image is sound. And that's a substantial proportion.
Audio plays a huge role in this, in supporting what otherwise is just an empty hallway. And the ability to engineer horror is a lot easier, in my opinion.
You know, being able to walk down a hall and just hear something, even if you can't see it, hear something walking, or hear something fall, or hear something scratching, and not knowing what's going to happen.
You know, this really is the unique side of, you know, video editing, sound editing, when the creation of sounds and stuff like this is really just made from just doing certain things. So, you know, okay, you know, like when, you know, the character is obviously walking in like a muddy area, they got the microphone up to the actual, you know, actor that is in the moment of recording, you know, just stepping on like wet mud, or using the sounds of like the monsters walking, and, you know, they're just sitting there, you know, recording themselves actually making those sounds. That stuff is so neat. It's so neat to be to see how they create that stuff to actually make it all work in the finished product.
Those are the type of things that can send a shiver down your spine without having to see anything at all.
I gotta say, Glenn spends an amazing amount of time focused on the audio.
The music to me is 80% of the audio. You've got to have this music in which you're tense.
Making people feel scared is kind of like what we're hired to do on this, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
We've done a lot of things with our Apprehension Engine.
The Apprehension Engine is something that Hollywood has used. It's brand new. It's this crazy invention, right? It's a weird looking thing, and it's got metal on it and strings and stuff. And the sounds it makes are just awful.
I love how he just like threw that in there. They're awful.
Built, and it's got a variety of things that you can do with it.
For me, the Apprehension Engine it's like a chaos playground.
That is so cool. Like it's kind of giving me goosebumps a little bit right now.
So you've got sort of this core box, and there's kind of a 3-string kind of cello component.
The most basic thing is it's got a reverb spring in it. You can just flick it with your finger like this and make the loudest noise you have ever heard. It's so disturbing. It's in Dr. Sleep, actually, several times.
It comes with a little bow, and with that, you know, there's like these rulers that it has, and each one is different lengths, so you can get different pitches and bend the rulers.
As if that wasn't enough, then it's got basically a hurdy-gurdy built into it, and the hurdy-gurdy can be played either with a slide, or you can play individual notes.
I think I watched YouTube videos to figure out how to even put it together, because the instruction manual is really minimal. And once you start playing it, you realize you're like, oh, well, it's just gonna tell you what, you know, you're gonna just react with it, and there's no like right way to play it. And I think it made so much more sense after spending some time with it. It's like, of course, yeah, it's just like whatever you know, put into it, it's gonna sort of give you that kind of like weird tension vibe energy back, and it's just gonna create this kind of like feedback loop of hellscape sounds that come out of it.
Right, and like they said, you know, just there's really no way, there's no wrong way to play it. Just like throw in some experimental, you know, notes.
I'm sure this has been done,
to see
but
what
I feel
works.
like someone needs to do like a Hollywood Bowl show where it's just like one individual up there, and it's just, you know, act one is, you know, beautiful sounds, because you can get some interestingly beautiful sounds and rhythms out of it. Yeah,
haunting.
But then act two would be, you know, everyone, it's time to go home. Like, let's get aggressive.
Act two.
Now this would be so fun to just like take some time with a couple people and just play around and see what we can come up with.
Every project you're trying to make it is fresh and unique and something people haven't heard before. And it makes it really, really challenging, but also incredibly fun too, because, you know, it's great to do crazy things that people haven't heard as much, and you get away with that like crazy in the horror genre.
Having the creative freedom to be experimental, like no boundaries, is so freeing on it, you know, especially with an instrument like this. Like, not many other projects would be cool with it.
Yeah, there you go. That's like the perfect utilization of bass right there.
Knowing when to use those tools, I think it's key to sort of manipulating, you know, the audience.
I mean, it is just amazing, the amount of audio and the amount of layers and the amount that the player feels like this is a real world.
I think if we're able to connect to the point that we can make our players jump in their seats, we are on a good path.
I didn't jump there, but hey, you know, we kinda expect it after you've been doing it for a little while.
They created this world. I mean, I love the sci-fi outer space aspect of it, you know, and then the intimacy of the prison and all the stuff that happens within that and how they designed all that. To me, they created this world that is awesome and also very scary.
I want the quality of the content that we're delivering to be on par with any film.
Alrighty, we'll be able to tell you, man, when the game releases in just about a month from now. Alrighty, you know, I definitely had my times, you know, like playing Dead Space and stuff, when you get to, you know, section like we just saw, where you have a path that is shown before you, but it's the direction that you take. The music kind of has somewhat of a climactic rise, and then it kind of just dissipates, and then you're just kind of left with like, okay, what's gonna happen now? You're kind of standing still. It's that moment where, all right, if I just kind of sit here for a little bit, I can gather myself and, you know, move on to the next mission or whatever it is that we're going. So this was a great addition to the docuseries here. You know, like I said, having the tension and the atmosphere is probably one of the starting blocks that you would need to allow everything to really work in a game like this, because it is what sets the mood for going through a type of experience like this, and being able to pull yourself together to take on the challenge of what horror lies ahead. So if you guys enjoyed this episode of the docuseries, and also my commentary as I broke down a few moments, you know, going through and analyzing, you know, the intricacies and stuff of the atmosphere and the tension, and also, you know, just my overall experience, you know, with the survival horror stuff, just make sure to stay connected to the channel. And if you want to throw in any extra appreciation, you know, make sure to put a like on the video, because I will decide to do a few more of these when they release some more. Now, I actually did hear that they are doing a podcast. It's a prequel podcast to the Callisto Protocol. So I'm wondering if they're going to be talking about, obviously, things that have happened in this prison before the events of our current situation, of when, you know, Jacob is here and he has to escape the infection or do what he needs to do in order to make it through the prison alive and find any other survivors out there and whatnot. So I'll probably check that out to see what that is going to be all about. So I will catch you guys when the next video is ready to go. The weekend is coming up, so I'll probably be able to dive into some more stuff. So until next time, guys, I will catch you then, and take care.